Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Bates Politics, and you're watching my show Histrionics, where every week we tackle women's issues from a centrist point of view. Quick note, this week you'll notice I am wearing my official Bates Politics lawsuit t-shirt. That's right, you can get yours at our lawyer's website, the Liberty Justice Center. This is a hilarious t-shirt because when our lawyers filed the lawsuit against the Biden administration over their TikTok ban, the Biden administration responded with a brief explaining why they needed to ban TikTok, and the entire thing was pretty much redacted like this. So head over, get your t-shirt. It says Base Politics versus Garland. We are heading to the courts next Monday, September 16th, and then likely to the Supreme Court after that. All right, on to today's subject. Women have been trending left in the U.S. for decades, and that has accelerated in recent years. But while many of them have done so in response to policies and personalities they perceive as hostile towards women, the reality is the left has a sexism problem of its own. That's right. While we spend a good bit of time pushing back on misogyny, I pick up on the right. This is ultimately a show focused on women's issues from a centrist point of view, and unfortunately, there are lots of problems on the left as well. From allowing men to invade women's spaces, to invalidating the sexual preferences of lesbians, to erasing the identity of women altogether, and maligning women who dare to still be just plain old feminists, the left has become quite hostile to women in recent years too. Here today to help me unpack these issues is one of my favorite former leftists, YouTuber Arielle Scarcella. You may remember Scarcella made waves in 2020 when she launched this bombshell video titled, "I'm a lesbian woman and I'm leaving the insane progressive left."
Hi, I'm Arielle. I'm a lesbian, and I don't think gender is a social construct. I don't think cis straight white men are evil. I don't believe that genital preferences are transphobic or that there are 97 genders. I don't think that male sex offenders belong in women's prisons. I don't think it's normal for people to be praised for walking around with shirts that say "kill terfs." I don't think like these people, and I no longer want to be associated with them.
Which was iconic. Scarcella told 4W at the time, "I'm for trans rights, but not at the expense of female safety. Once it crossed that line, I knew I had to take a much more definitive stance. Male sex offenders identifying as trans women to be placed in women's prisons? No thanks." She also said the loud minority is having a negative impact on LGBT rights. If they continue down this path, she said, they will be more and more hated and LGBT people will be less accepted. These people are the voice of us right now, even though it's not what the majority of us believe. I am thrilled to have Arielle here today to discuss the threat to women's rights on this front, and from the additional perspective of the threat to women's rights as they pertain to lesbian women's rights as well. But before we dive into this episode, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you've not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. All right, well, I am so excited to have you here. I've been fangirling privately for years. We have some mutual friends, so you came to my attention, I think, 2 or 3 years ago via Sarah Higdon and then Brad. I started watching your content, but like, you're an OG. You've been around. You were like on ground zero for YouTube. What has that evolution in and of itself been like for you? Is it so weird that this has become a whole infrastructure now?
I mean, I hoped that it would be that when I started, but when we started, we didn't get paid. We didn't do it for fame. We did it because we were either bored, over the summer, or we wanted to make friends, or in my case, I had just gotten fired from my first job because I was calling out. I had a lot of health issues, and I had gotten fired for that, and I needed a space to remember who I was, and I wound up finding community, which is what it was back then. It was about community. But remember, that's when we still had video responses. There weren't there weren't drama. It was just like, oh, somebody said something, and oh, there's a video response, and it was like underneath the original video. And then everyone started spamming, and it's just changed so much. I was just having a conversation with my friend Joey 2 days ago about this, and how YouTube back then, at least for gay content creators and for regular content creators too, there was like maybe a few hundred of us back then in 2009, right? Everybody knew us. Whatever niche you were in, even in 2015, let's say, you knew everyone else in your niche. Now, you can walk past a person in the street that's TikTok famous, have no idea who they are, and you're following them. Like, people will follow me, watch my videos, walk past me on the street, and have no clue who I am. So it's a very bizarre shift in things, and it's an oversaturation of content. But at the same time, I mean, there's good and bad to all of it. I think we just have to figure it out as we go along, so.
It's interesting. I feel the same way. Like, you'll see somebody on TikTok or on YouTube who has 1 million plus followers, and you're thinking, I've never even heard of this person.
No
And
clue.
so it's
No clue.
interesting because you can have a lot of followers, but like, what is influence these days? How much weight does a person carry? I mean, I think we're still trying to figure out how to measure some of those things. But
Right.
for you, when you first got into this space, you know, I'm curious, like, since you didn't really intend to build your career in this, but you found yourself sort of accidentally in this world of media and politics. I know you had this big shift around 2020 where you all of a sudden sort of started distancing from the left. What was that like for you? Was it kind of like losing your religion? I mean, what did you grapple with a lot when you kind of had to decide to part ways?
The funny thing is I have like my MAGA hoodie behind me. I wasn't it wasn't that I was pro Trump or like that I shifted like dramatically to the right wing right away. Like, I'm still not fully right wing. Like, I'm definitely a moderate right leaning person. Like, because some of the things that are considered right leaning these days shouldn't even be considered right leaning. Like,
Agreed.
the fact that we have to build the wall and protect our citizens right leaning is ridiculous. But I originally, when I was creating content for LGBT people at the time, the Republican Party was not for gay rights. Neither was the Democratic Party, remember?
Right.
Obama did not come into office as pro-LGBT, so I was creating content specifically around gay rights and actual gay activism and LGBT activism. And then we got our rights in 2012, at least in New York, and then 2015 nationwide. And things started to shift politically for us. And then 2016, when Trump came into the picture, the Republican Party, or like the moderate party, whatever you consider Trump to be in, was like, yeah, like, we're pretty okay with the gay thing. Like, it's been around for 4 years now. Like, we're cool with it. And all of a sudden, we were able to not be a one issue vote kind of type of voter, right? We had to look at other things that we needed as Americans. And the funny thing is, a lot of people think that I left the left because, you know, for money or something like that. Like, I was getting more money. Well, maybe now it's about the same, but for the first 3 years I left the left, I wasn't making as much money as when I was on the left. Like, I lost a lot of sponsorships. I lost a lot of friends. I lost brand deals. I lost management. Like, people didn't want to help me with brand deals anymore. I'm no longer invited to VidCon or Playlist Live or anything like that. I mean, I'm invited to other conferences that wound up being better for me anyway, because I kind of aged out of that demographic anyway. It wound up just kind of happening naturally. But the truth is, even when I thought that I was on the left, I would fight with them constantly. Like, they always had an issue with something, and you could never do anything perfect. And I was like, this was like my life's work, right? So I would get legitimately offended. Like, I'm the only one talking about this, and even I'm not talking about it perfectly enough for these people.
Yeah.
And I would fight with them every day about something. I remember at one point, and this is one of the points that I was just like, all right, I'm done with this. I remember talking about my own chest, and there was a bunch of trans men, supposed trans men, in the comments saying there should have been a trigger warning. You shouldn't say that you shouldn't say that breasts are inherently feminine. And I'm like, excuse me, I'm talking about my own body. Who the hell are you to tell me how to speak about myself or even about you?
Right.
Like, just click off. Like, literally click the video. Click X. That's it. That's what I have to do.
Completely deranged.
They have no self-accountability. They had become the victim party, and I'm a very spiritual person, and I always have since 2011, when my dad passed away. I became very, very spiritual, and I think most people do when they have like a big trauma in their life. I was very young. I was like 23 when he passed, and it changed my outlook on life. It made me want to grow as a person and help other people continue to grow and not be the victim and not live that type of negative lifestyle. Not that I was like that in the first place, but it made me want to help others not be that way.
Wow.
And I just realized that the left has always, at least in the last 10, 15 years, has always been that way.
Yeah. And that's one thing I've admired about you from afar so much is like, you've got a real spine. And I think that that's something that really is lacking so often in media and in politics. I think in part because there is a lot of pressure. And I actually assumed what you said would be true with your experiences. And this is why a lot of people stay quiet. when it comes to media, even when it comes to abuse in media, is that they are afraid of losing power, of losing connections, of losing sponsorships and money. And they often do if they break with their tribe. You know, we call audience capture because it's a real thing. And it's true on the left and the right, but I think the left tends to be a little bit more like militant, if you will, whereas if you break in any shape or form, they are going to come for you. And I certainly observed that happening. And as I've kind of looked back over history and what you went through, I really think that you stuck to your guns in a very admirable way. And I think that you've been largely correct. You know, some of the things that you've pointed out, which I want to get into here, are really troubling. I mean, when you talk about some of the things they have said, you know, this show focuses on women's issues. I end up spending a lot of time talking about like misogyny and just hostility that I observe on the right that's been directed at women lately. But when you really start digging into some of the things that have been said about and to women, particularly lesbian women on the left, it is mind-blowing. Telling lesbian women that they must be attracted to people who were born biologically male. That is disgusting. Telling women that they should be okay with people who were born biologically male and who many of them still are male. They've not even transitioned, being sent into their prisons and into their spaces where they do not have protection and where women are already vulnerable. Telling them that, you know, women cannot be defined based on the gender they were born into. I mean, all of these things end up being an erasure of women's identity, of lesbians' identity. And it's interesting to me for, you know, somebody like you who fought so hard for so many years just to get equal rights and recognition in society, and now to have the left turn on that and start dismantling it. I mean, wow.
It's wild. It's wild. And the funny thing is, what you were saying with the trans women in prison thing, like 80%, I think the going statistic is, this is with actual trans women, not people pretending to be trans women. This is with actual trans women, people that have gender dysphoria, that transition in some way. 80% of them, I believe, still have their male genitals. There's a number of reasons for that. There's a lot of complications. It's actually, they probably still have dysphoria with it, but it's a very dangerous surgery. So then that's 8 out of 10 women that are actually, that's at 8 out of 10 trans women that are actually gender dysphoric. Now you have people coming into prisons or coming into women's spaces that are not even trans women at all and just calling themselves that, right? To get the oppression points, to get access to women's sports or women's spaces or locker rooms or whatever, or women's bodies in this case. They come into lesbian dating apps and trying to hook up with us. It's 100 out of 100 have penises. It's 10 out of 10, you know what I mean? And it's crazy. And even friends of mine that are trans, like Sarah, Marcus, the offensive tranny, Blair White, Buck Angel, like they're opposite ends of the trans spectrum. Some of them are trans women, some of them are trans men. Even they see the major issue regarding specifically the lesbian community. We've always kind of been, understandably so, not that I agree with it, but I understand why. Understandably so, we've always been the least likely to be taken seriously as a sexual orientation. And I've said this years ago in videos, like in society today still, if you meet a man that is bisexual, almost everyone will say, nah, he's not bi, he's gay. He's just really gay. He's just in the closet, right? So then you meet a guy that's gay and you say, oh yeah, he's gay. He's 100% gay. You meet a girl that's bisexual, yeah, she's bi, or maybe she's straight. And then you meet a lesbian, I don't really believe, I don't think she's really gay. She's probably bi, or she probably likes women sometimes. The number of times that not as much now, right? Because people know who I am. But the amount of times that I've told somebody that I was a lesbian, right? And this is, I'm sure lesbians can all attest to this. And then they come back 2 minutes later and go, so you're bi, right? I literally just told you I'm a lesbian. I'm not even kidding, this happened. And I'm like, I don't understand why they can't fathom a person not needing penis in their life. And that's really what it comes down to. Somebody that has sex with somebody that has a penis is taken much more seriously than someone who doesn't, which is why a bisexual woman is really straight. A bisexual man is really gay. Is really gay. That's what they would say. But
do you think it's like a fetish? Do you think it's like a fetish like that they put on women who are lesbians? Do you think this is like a sexualization of women that men don't get?
I think that most people who don't know lesbians in real life just see lesbians in porn. And first of all, it doesn't even look real, and they're not lesbians. And it's not made for lesbians. It's made for men. So we are fetishized in that way, I would say. But most people, we're also like, I wouldn't say, unless you're like a butch lesbian, we're not exactly easy to pinpoint. Like with gay men, even if they're like jocks, they're kind of always a little feminine, or you can always kind of tell, right? So like they exist more in the wild to people. Does that make sense?
They're
So
more
they're kind of
visible.
out.
Yeah, no, that
They're
does.
always out in media more. Like you don't see a show about a lesbian besides Ellen, right? There was always gay men in shows. There were more. I guess there was a lesbian couple in Friends, but there were more gay men in that show. There were more gay men. There was Will and Grace, and there was all these other. There were many more gay celebrities than lesbian celebrities. It's always been that way, and it's still that way. And the people that are lesbians are transing now. So now you have Ellen Page. All of a sudden, there's no more lesbian. They're all transing themselves. So it doesn't even.
Yeah, the representation factor I hadn't really thought very much about, but it is almost like even when you do see it in media on Friends, that example was, I remember it being almost like the butt of a lot of jokes that they made about Ross, like, oh, you lost your wife to a woman, ha ha, like, and now you continue to see this erasure, and so it really is. It's a very interesting form of sexism that I think goes under discussed. I am curious though, like I think this is something that's happening quite overtly on the left, but it feels like there's not a lot of pushback. And I think there's obvious reasons for why that is. It seems like being a true feminist in the original sense of the word is now something that gets you slandered on the left. You get called a terf. I know that's been lobbed at you. It gets lobbed at J.K. Rowling. I, like you and J.K. Rowling, love trans people. I have trans friends. I am pro trans people's rights as adults to transition. We'll defend them, every day, all day. But I have to stop when it gets to infringing on other people's rights, and will continue to defend women as well. I don't find anything that's been said in these conversations from the parties I've mentioned to be anti-trans in any way, but I feel like that is an insult that gets lobbed around to silence people, and it seems to work quite well. Do you feel like there's others in your community that are in agreement and just won't stick their neck out on these fronts?
I can't tell you the amount of people. It came to a point in I would say my life, not my career, but it wound up impacting my career, where I knew personally these people that claimed to be friends of mine, that believed everything I said, that it was more safe than ever before to admit agreeing with me, but still chose not to. And I realized that, you know what, it's time to dead these people out of my life, get them out of my life. Because at this point, I would say there's more people on our side. They're not outspoken as much, but there are more people on our side than not. And because they're not outspoken, no pun intended, it's giving me more flack and more hate. And in a way that's, I don't want to say it's abusive, because I can't blame them for the hate that I get, but at the same time, it's like, come on now. You agree with everything I say and you can't even say it like one time.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yeah.
Everyone would just need to say it one time and we would see a shift.
Mm-hmm.
We would see a massive shift.
I get a lot of similar DMs when it comes to the show in general from women, especially in conservative media. They're like, thank God somebody's speaking out. And it's like, if everybody would just speak out.
If everyone would just say it one time.
Yeah.
it really would change the entire energy behind it. Because right now everybody thinks that the energy that the main, what's the way to say it? Everyone thinks that the majority of the energy is coming from their side. And I think the majority of loudness is coming from their side, but I don't think the majority of people agree with them.
No, I think there's absolutely, I think the tidal shift is happening, and I think that you've been on the front lines, and I think that the culture is moving. I think there's going to be backlash, and unfortunately that's something else that you've predicted all along, that I absolutely have agreed with. Brad has said this too, that there was tremendous work done. It was hard won, hard fought to gain acceptance, to gain equal rights for gay people in this country. And now, because they have gone so far beyond that with this latest push, I think there is going to unfortunately be backlash. And I hope what doesn't happen is that it doesn't end up creating a backlash towards that ground that was won. But culturally, you could see, some effects of that.
I mean, we already see it, which is why Brad and I, I started the concept damage control, because that's really what it comes down to. It's not even always gay people, I would say there's a big, I mean, it's some gay people, it's some drag queens that are problems, right? But I would say the majority of people aren't even LGBT that are creating this massive division. It is the young queer activists that are probably actually straight, honestly, that probably have depression or body dysmorphia, not gender dysphoria. They hate themselves, or they're figuring themselves out, or nobody wants to date them, and they're miserable, and they call themselves non-binary and queer, and then they speak for us, right? And that is a big problem. And it's funny because it's like the highest form of cultural appropriation you can get. Meanwhile, we're told that we're bigots and transphobes and terfs and fascists and all these things, and meanwhile it's, you know, don't throw stones from a glass house kind of thing. These people can't figure out that they're the actual problem. And it's funny because when I was on that side, I saw it happening, but I didn't know how to correct it in any other way than what I had been doing at the time. And because I was still a part of that world, I would get hate. Like, I get less hate now that I actually left, because they no longer have, not that they had control over me then, but they thought they did. Now that I completely left the relationship, they have no control over me. So I don't get as many threats or video responses coming after me, because they're like, we lost her, we can't fix her or control her anymore, you know. So now they're going after people like Taylor Swift. Did you see this recently, yesterday?
Well, not about these issues in particular. I saw about the Britney,
but she was like hugging somebody. Yeah. I forget who it was. Mahomes,
Britney Mahomes,
Austin Mahomes' wife or whatever it was, or
she's a Trump supporter or something Trump like
supporter.
that.
You can't even hug somebody that's a Trump supporter now. Like, this is wild.
Yeah. So okay, it was Patrick Mahomes' wife, Britney, and they have said some,
the football player.
Yeah, they've said some pro-Trump stuff. I think he plays football with her boyfriend, and so they were seen together in a box being friendly, and now she's canceled. Right?
Done. That's it.
The whole thing.
It was all over gay media yesterday. I don't even follow these people anymore, and it still showed up on my For You page. That's how viral. That's how gay viral it went. You know how it's like black viral, like it goes to the black community. It's going gay viral. Yeah.
Because they think she's gay, right? Is that still a thing?
No, I don't think they think she's gay. I think they're obsessed with Taylor Swift, and they think she's like their mom or whatever they call it. And if she does if you step one toe out of line, I'll bring you straight home. I don't know if you know where that's from. It's a Harry Potter quote. But yeah, all she does is step a little bit the wrong way, and the gays come for her. Because they feel like she's on the left, they have control over her.
It's like, how do you live this way? I can't fathom how people live this way. You consider yourself a feminist, right? You would still consider
an old school feminist, not the new version. And I had this conversation on Jubilee where I came in as an anti-feminist because of the word feminist changing. I don't agree with the new age feminists, but a feminist in the old school definition, I think most people are these days.
I struggle to define myself because of this too, where I'm like, up until like 1990s feminism, like I'm rocking with them, and then current feminism is trash and garbage and
horrible. All it is hating on men and men. Somebody, I think it was Zuby, right? You follow Zuby too. I think he did a post where it was like the evolution of feminism, and it was something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like women are equal to men, women don't need men, and it was like every 5 years it changed. Then it was like women are men, men are women, or something. And I'm like, damn, like it's true. Like, and it was like every 10 years or whatever it was, shifting. And it's like right around here, we started to disagree in the last 4 things that happened. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I don't agree with any of it.
It's gotten really difficult to talk about, because I feel like my whole life I come from the right? So I kind of had a similar trajectory to you, where I sort of came from a certain grouping, and then as I got a little bit older, I felt like the right was moving in ways that didn't totally align with my beliefs, which were really centered around capitalism and individual liberty, and just like keep the government out of people's lives as a whole.
Right.
And so I've kind of found myself politically homeless, but like I still, am a bit more attached to the right, I guess, if you will, because they tend to be at least somewhat still more aligned with those values than the left by far.
Right.
But the thing that has been difficult for me in the past couple of years is, growing up, people always accuse the right of being racist and sexist, and I would defend that with my life. Like, of course not. In recent years, there's been this like rise of the red pill manosphere, and like the right has really gotten very cozy with a lot of this, and there's been an increase in rhetoric, not so much yet an increase in like policies per se that match it, although some of them have been floating around that make me uncomfortable. And so a lot of my show has been pushing back on some of that. I'm curious moving more onto the right. I know you're kind of like me where you're still politically homeless, but what has your experience been moving into right-wing spaces? Has it been more or less accepting than you anticipated? I mean, my perception is that at least when it comes to LGBTQ issues, the right has become more accepting, whereas maybe when it comes to women's issues, it's become a little bit more hostile in recent years.
I think I would disagree with you. I think for the most part, I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't have the same experience, I guess I would say.
Yeah, no, I would love to hear your experience.
I think haven't had any women's issues really, or lesbian issues with people that are, that are calling themselves on the right. Like I have people like Rogan and Grant and Rob Smith, people that are gay, people that are straight on the right, and all of them understand every issue that I've ever talked about in my content. Like they all understand where I'm coming from. The only issue that I would say I don't deal with it personally is the abortion issue. But at the same time, it's because I'm a lesbian, but at the same time, I think the majority of people in this country are pro-choice, but I think that the left has just pushed it so far to the left. It's like, hold on, like now you're pushing for abortion up until birth. Like that's just, I mean, that's just, I can't even put it into words how crazy that is. But
I think they have their own, well, I mean, same issues we see with the trans issues, I think, too, where they push so far and then you see a backlash. I guess what I'm talking about, though, is, I mean, I think the abortion issue is sort of, I feel like both sides it's hard to have a conversation with. They both overreact. I think that the left and right kind of, they go to extremes where really, I think you're right. Most people are pro-choice. Most people want normal restrictions on it. Most people are not comfortable with it post first term. And I think most people agree it should be in the states. I guess more what I'm talking about, and again, this hasn't been codified, so it isn't, policies in place. It's more the discussion. But like recent attacks on IVF and surrogacy, attacks on like no-fault divorce. I mean, some of that has been particularly targeted at the gay community in some ways. I'm just kind of curious if you've seen any of that or like what your thoughts are.
I saw one or two articles with IVF specifically talking about gay men, and I think I'm a pro your body your choice kind of person, and I stick with that throughout. If you want to be a surrogate for a gay couple, and it is consensual, and you have filled out the paperwork, and they've agreed, and you've agreed to give up the baby, and they've agreed to pay for it, blah blah blah. That's your body. Like, do it. What the hell you want with it? Like you are bringing a life into another family's and potentially bringing more love into that family's life. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think there might be a little bit of homophobia, maybe a little bit of religious issues when it comes to the far right or whatever you want to call that, conservative people when it comes to gays. I think the same thing goes for lesbians. There are some lesbians that people don't want to see have families, but I think I don't know. I've seen it more with gay men than anything, I think. And I don't know. I've only seen it a few times because it's not really big on my like to-do list of things to work on, because I don't think I want kids, and I'm not trying to have a baby currently.
And what's interesting is it's not coming from Trump. Like I see a lot of it pinned on Trump, and I want to be clear because I can't stand like bad media. These are not Trump positions, and he's actually been very, very moderate on these things. It's more so coming from, down ballot and other ranks within the GOP, but they are concerning to me, and it is just this weird rise in concerns around issues that up until a year or two ago I've personally never heard floated. So it has been interesting, and it makes me think of I'm sure you're familiar with this, but you had the gay rights agenda. It was very well funded. There were a lot of organizations that were getting millions of dollars a year in order to get marriage equality. And once they got it, they did not pack up shop and go home.
I was just gonna say, you nailed it. There's organizations like HRC and GLAAD and GLSEN and all these other organizations that have millions upon millions of dollars, and like you said, they want to, keep shop up, right? They want to keep going. There's nothing left to fight. There's not much left to fight for. We have equality. We have equal rights. We can have our own families. There's laws against discrimination based on sexual orientation or sexuality, whatever you want to call it. It's sexual orientation, but people use it interchangeably.
Well, so I was going to make the point that what they did with those dollars is they kept raising and they started directing it towards this trans rights whole.
It's the trans rights, but it's not even trans rights because trans people have rights too.
Right. But
as an adult, you can transition legally. I mean, there are certain medical procedures depending on the state. If you're able to change your birth certificate or your driver's license to say M or F, blah, blah, blah. But now we also have things that they're fighting, like that, you know, that these organizations like HRC are fighting for, like 87 genders in New York City.
Well, so my theory, I guess, is what I'm trying to get around to is that when we see these things popping up on the right with like all of a sudden there's, you know, a target on IVF, there's a target on surrogacy. My theory is that you had a similar infrastructure on the right to get rid of Roe v. Wade. And now that they've accomplished that, those dollars and those organizations are redirecting their energies elsewhere.
Are going to go after the gays just because why not? Stick it to them because they've been assholes.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get it. It's just a little bit of a, I wouldn't say defensive, but they're on the offensive now, I think. And I think they know that, and they're going to just kind of try to, you know, stick it where it hurts. Maybe pun intended in this case for a little bit.
Have to ask.
They can get away with it.
I have to ask about one of the things that comes up the most in my comments. I'm not even sure if you've heard this before or not, but like I said, I deal with red pill narratives all the time on this show. I'm often debunking many of the things that they float around. But if you're not aware, they are very, very hyper fixated on divorce and what that looks like on the ground in this country. And they're really especially focused on the fact that, according to them, women cause the majority of divorces. Now, I would push back and say that women file the paperwork in the majority of divorces. That doesn't mean that they necessarily cause them. But most of the time when you argue that point, they often point to the divorce rate in lesbian couples and say that the divorce rate is also very, very high. What do you have to say to that? Do you have thoughts? I mean, this is a totally opinion based, but I'm just curious, you know, what your thoughts would be on that.
I think I wouldn't say that lesbians are getting more divorces because women cause more problems. I would say that lesbians get more divorces because they hop into relationships too quickly and there's way too much feelings, way too many feelings involved too quickly. And it becomes very hormonal and there's not enough logic and there's no man to balance it out, so to speak. I've seen this over and over again. It's not that they don't actually care about each other. It's that they dive into shit too quick. And it's not that, in my opinion anyway, it's not that the women are causing the issues. It's that the issue isn't that they're women. Well, I guess the issue is that they're women, but in a biological sense, not in a social sense.
Yeah.
Right? Not in what they're doing. It's just how they're made.
My hypothesis has been, and I don't think this is necessarily like a strike against women, but I think women are more emotionally attuned to issues. Like we are more likely to pick up on undercurrents, like problems, emotional disconnection in relationships, and we are
That's
less
also true.
capable of like bearing that. You know, if I have emotional disconnection from somebody for years and years, I'm not capable of just continuing to let that go and stay in relationship. And I do not benefit as much from a relationship as a man does, at least, you know, stereotypically, when they are getting many of their needs met by women, including women cooking and cleaning for them and giving them kids and taking care of the kids. So they don't have as much incentive to stay in a relationship and put up with it as men do. And so I don't think that that's a strike against women, but I was just wanted to hear your thoughts on it because it gets thrown around all the time and it drives me absolutely insane.
That's just from the lesbian perspective. I would say that's generally what I've seen the last 20 years that I've been in the community, so to speak.
In your experience, moving from left to like center right, if you will, I mean, when you get out of the political scene, but more just in like the day-to-day, you know, normie life experience, has it made dating more difficult? Is it as hyper like politicized in the dating pool as it has become in these like media online spaces?
Yes. Yeah, I've been single for like 7 years now, and it's not that there are a decent amount of lesbians that are not woke, so to speak. It's just the pool, there's a decent amount of them, but they're kind of spread out, and a lot of them are in relationships already, maybe because they're like more conservative leaning and I don't know, they have more traditional values, they stick with their partner. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just not the time I'm supposed to meet the right person yet, but dating in general has become more difficult, I would say. There's a few people that I've met along the way, though, that I just wasn't attracted to, or they weren't attracted to me, that we became like really good friends. So I would rather people love me for who I am than love me for who I'm not.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
would you go into the political media public person space again? I mean, not starting all over where you were now, but if you were looking at where we're at right now, if you were talking to younger people looking at the space, what would you say to them?
meaning, wait, what do you mean? Would I tell people to come into the space?
Yeah, right now. Because I mean, I look at where I was when I decided to go into this space, and I'm like, yeah, it makes total sense. Everything was objectively good. I maybe had a little bit of a rose-colored glasses outlook. But nowadays, when I have young people come up and say, I want to do what you do, I'm looking to get into this, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, there's benefits. I certainly like aspects of my job, but the toxicity, I mean, taking the hits that you've taken, I really do. I just have to emphasize again, I just admire you so much. I think it really is so few and far between that you see people who will stick to their guns, stick to their principles, and be willing to take the consequences, because they do come sometimes when you do that. I've lost jobs as well. I've lost money as well when I have been willing to compromise. But we need more people who are willing to do that. And unfortunately, the incentive structure in this industry, it doesn't really propel that often. And so when I have people that really want to get into this kind of work to make a difference, I'm often torn on whether or not I would tell them to jump in or not.
My advice would be a spiritual teaching. And I would say, if this is your dharma and it's what you're supposed to do, the path will open for you. Like it's almost like you know you're supposed to do it. You don't know how it's going to happen, but it will happen if it's supposed to happen, kind of thing. I felt it deep in my bones that I was no longer in alignment with these woke leftists. And I didn't know I didn't know who I was going to lose or what I was going to lose, my job, my status, whatever. I just knew that I had to lose it. I knew that I was over it because it was attached to me and it didn't feel good. And at that moment, I always tell this story because it's the truth. And it's also an important lesson. I had two friends. I had Tim Pool and Sydney Watson. And I went to them and I said, I have to make this video about leaving the left. Can you look at it? Can you tell me what you think about this script? And they were both reviewed it and they were like, post it. We're going to help promote it, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, don't look back. And I was like, I won't. And I just had to trust that my feeling and what I knew was the right thing to do would eventually work out for me, even if it didn't work out right away. And it has. So
that's beautiful.
That's
well,
my
that
advice.
Is an amazing close. I will leave it there. I cannot say it any better than that. Tell people where they can find you if they want to look you up.
YouTube.com/Arielle.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Arielle.
Thanks,
just
Nana.
adore you. Thanks for your work, and just know that I am here rooting for you all the way.
And me as well for you.
All right, guys, I hope you liked this episode. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to this channel if you've not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you like this video, don't forget to check out others in my series, Histrionics, here, and you can watch my other weekly show, the Base Politics Podcast, here.